Helen Brooks sat in her chair at the back of the great council hall and watched the aliens argue about her people once again. The Galactic Council had been meeting for 3 days now, and every single vote had gone against humanity. She looked at the datapad in her hands and saw the numbers that made her heart sink. Humans had given more ships, more soldiers, more money, and more technology to the Council than any other species. They had fought in wars they never started. They had shared medical advances that saved billions of alien lives. They had built trade routes that made everyone rich except themselves. Yet here they sat, being treated like children who could not be trusted with important decisions. The Vorthan ambassador was speaking now. His blue skin glowed bright with excitement as he talked about the new law they wanted to pass. All human medical technology would become free for everyone to use, no payment needed. No credit given to the humans who spent decades creating it. The Vorthans had never invented anything useful themselves, but they were very good at taking things from others. Helen watched as species after species nodded their agreement. The humans would give up their life-saving medicines so that aliens who had contributed nothing could use them for free. Helen thought about Dr. Amy Watson. Back on Earth, Amy had worked for 20 years to create the cancer cure that was being discussed today. She had missed her daughter's wedding because she was in the lab. She had given up having more children because her work was too important. Now aliens who had never even thanked humanity for previous gifts were voting to take Amy's life work and give it away to anyone who wanted it. They called it sharing. Helen called it theft. The vote was called, and Helen was not surprised by the result. 47 species voted yes. 1 species voted no. Humanity was alone again. The Zephyrion delegate actually laughed when the results were announced. He made a joke about humans being selfish and not understanding the greater good. Other aliens joined in the laughter. Helen felt something cold settle in her chest. After 3 years of this treatment, she was done trying to make them understand. She stood up slowly and began putting her papers into her bag. The hall was still, full of celebrating aliens who were happy about their free gift. None of them seemed to notice that the human ambassador was packing her things. Helen picked up her communication device and pressed a single button. It was a simple signal that went out to every human ship, station, and outpost in the galaxy. The message was just 2 words. Come home. The Kepler station received the signal first. Commander Jake Morrison was in his office reviewing patrol reports when his screen flashed. He had been expecting this day for months. Jake looked out his window at the alien ships docked at his station. Ships that would have been destroyed by pirates long ago if not for human protection. He activated the station's announcement system and spoke clearly into the microphone. All human personnel were to report to their ships immediately. They were leaving within the hour. Captain Lisa Grant got the signal while she was treating injured aliens in the medical bay of her ship. Her crew had been working for 36 hours straight to save lives after a mining accident on Rigel Prime. The aliens had begged for human help because human medicine was the best in the galaxy. Lisa looked at the alien patients who would live because of her team's skill and knowledge. Tomorrow those same aliens would vote to take human medical advances without paying for them. She told her medical team to finish their current surgeries and then prepare for departure. Admiral P. Collins was meeting with alien military leaders when his aide brought him the message. They were planning joint exercises to protect trade routes that humans had built and maintained for decades. The alien officers were arguing about who deserved the most credit for keeping the peace. None of them mentioned that human ships did 90% of the actual fighting. Pete excused himself from the meeting and went to prepare his fleet for immediate departure. Back in the council hall, Helen finished packing and walked toward the exit. A few aliens were starting to notice that she was leaving, but they seemed confused rather than concerned. The Vorthan ambassador called out to her as she reached the door. He asked if she was feeling sick and needed medical attention. His voice was mocking and several other aliens laughed at his joke. Helen stopped and turned to look at him. She said nothing. She simply looked at his smug blue face for 10 seconds and then continued walking. The first ships began leaving within 2 hours of Helen's signal. Human cargo vessels departed from trading stations across the galaxy. Human warships powered up their engines and left the alien fleets they had been protecting. Human medical ships finished their emergency cases and then headed for human space. The aliens who noticed the departures assumed it was just a normal rotation of personnel. Humans came and went all the time on their mysterious errands. By the end of the day, 50% of human assets were gone from Council space. By the end of the week, that number was 80%. The aliens finally started to realize something unusual was happening when their supply shipments stopped arriving on schedule. Cargo ships that had carried goods between worlds for decades simply failed to appear at their destinations. Space stations that had always hummed with human activity became strangely quiet. Council Chairman Veltar tried to contact Helen several times, but his messages went unanswered. He sent formal requests to Earth asking for explanations, but received only automated replies stating that humanity was withdrawing from galactic affairs. No reasons were given, no demands were made, no threats were issued. Humanity was simply leaving, and they were not interested in discussing it. The last human ship left Council space exactly 1 month after Helen walked out of that meeting. Engineer Tony Mitchell was aboard the final transport, carrying the access codes for the quantum communication network that connected every civilized world in the galaxy. As his ship crossed into human territory, Tony transmitted a simple message to all the networks he had built and maintained for the past 15 years. System lockout in 30 days. Then he turned off his transmitter and never looked back. The galaxy suddenly felt much larger and much quieter without human voices filling the comm channels. 6 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared from Council space, and the galaxy was starting to feel the effects of their absence. Admiral Kexran of the Vorthan fleet was the first to understand how bad things were getting. He stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the tactical display showing the Kepler station under attack. 3 pirate vessels were tearing the station apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop them. The station's shields were failing because the fusion generators were running out of fuel. Commander Jake Morrison used to coordinate supply runs. That kept the station powered and protected. Without Jake's careful scheduling, the supply ships had stopped coming months ago. The aliens who worked at the station had tried to contact suppliers directly, but they discovered that most of the shipping companies were human-owned and no longer operating in Council space. Kexran watched helplessly as the pirates finished looting the station and escaped into hyperspace. His ships were too slow to catch them, and his weapons were too weak to fight them effectively. He remembered how Jake's human patrol ships used to hunt down pirates before they could attack anyone. Those ships had been fast, well-armed, and crewed by humans who seemed to enjoy the challenge of protecting innocent civilians. Now the pirates operated with complete freedom, and Kexran could do nothing but count the dead. The communication network was also falling apart. Engineer Tony Mitchell had built a quantum relay system that allowed instant communication between any 2 points in the galaxy. The aliens had always assumed the system maintained itself, but they were learning otherwise. Relay stations were going offline one by one as their power cells died and their computers crashed. The aliens had the user manuals that Tony had written, but they could not understand the complex mathematics and engineering principles involved. Dr. Zara Wells had been working with human medical teams for 5 years before they left. She was trying to treat a plague outbreak on Rigel 7, but she was failing badly without human help. The disease was spreading faster than she could track it, and her treatments were not working. She needed access to the Galactic Medical Database that humans had maintained, but the password had been changed, and all her requests for access were denied by automated systems. Zara remembered Dr. Amy Watson explaining how to use the database's advanced search functions. Amy had taught her about pattern recognition software that could identify new diseases in hours instead of weeks. But Amy was gone now, and the software was locked behind security protocols that Zara could not break. She watched the death count climb higher each day and knew that millions would die because she could not access the medical knowledge that humans had freely shared for decades. The economic problems were getting worse, too. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for generations were now dangerous and unreliable. Human escort ships used to protect cargo vessels from pirates and guide them through dangerous space. Without that protection, shipping costs were rising rapidly, and many companies were simply refusing to transport goods between certain systems. Manager Veltok was trying to run a mining operation on Vega Prime, but his equipment kept breaking down. The fusion reactors that powered his machines had been designed by humans and required specific maintenance procedures that his alien engineers could not figure out. The instruction manuals were written in human technical language that was too complex for universal translators to handle accurately. Veltok had tried hiring alien engineers from other species, but none of them understood human technology well enough to keep it running. His production had dropped by 70% in just 6 months. The rare minerals he produced were essential for manufacturing throughout the galaxy, but he could not extract them without working reactors. He had sent dozens of messages to human engineering companies begging for help, but all his requests were politely declined. Humanity was no longer interested in maintaining alien equipment. The defense grid around the Centauri system was also failing. Captain Rex Holland was responsible for protecting 12 billion civilians, but his early warning sensors were going blind. The detection network had been designed and installed by humans who understood how to calibrate the sensitive equipment. Without proper maintenance, the sensors were producing false readings and missing real threats. Rex had already failed to detect 2 pirate raids that destroyed civilian ships near his sector. His alien technicians were trying their best, but they did not understand the quantum principles behind the sensor arrays. They could replace broken parts, but they could not optimize the system's performance or update its software. Rex knew that eventually a major attack would get through his failing defenses and millions would die. The Galactic Council was meeting almost every day now, but they seemed unable to solve any of these problems. Chairman Veltar had tried sending diplomatic messages to Earth, but they were all politely refused. The automated response always said the same thing. Humanity was no longer participating in galactic affairs and wished everyone well in their future endeavors. No explanations were given and no negotiations were offered. Some council members suggested using force to make humanity return, but that idea was quickly abandoned. Military advisors reminded them that human space was protected by defense systems that nobody understood. The few alien ships that had tried to enter the Sol system without permission had been disabled by weapons that left no energy signatures and caused no permanent damage. The crews were unharmed, but their ships were left drifting in space until human rescue vessels towed them back to the border. Food production was becoming a crisis too. Many agricultural worlds had relied on human farming technology and fertilizers to feed their populations. Genetic engineers from Earth had helped develop crop strains that could grow in hostile environments and produce larger harvests without human expertise. Crop yields were dropping, and some worlds were facing actual starvation. Governor Lexstar of the Farming World new series was watching his people's food supplies dwindle. His agricultural specialists were trying to maintain the hybrid crops that human scientists had developed, but they were failing. The plants required precise chemical treatments and genetic modifications that only humans knew how to provide. Lexstar's world had fed 15 other systems for decades, but now he could barely feed his own people. Transportation was also breaking down. Human pilots had operated most of the passenger ships that carried people between worlds. They were skilled navigators who knew the safest routes through dangerous space and could handle emergency situations that would kill less experienced crews. With the humans gone, space travel was becoming risky and expensive. Many aliens were simply staying on their homeworlds rather than risking dangerous journeys. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about how much they had depended on human knowledge and expertise. For decades, humans had quietly handled the difficult and dangerous jobs that kept civilization running smoothly. They had shared their advanced technology freely and asked for nothing in return except fair treatment and respect. Now that they were gone, the aliens were discovering that their great galactic civilization was built on a foundation of human competence and generosity, but it was too late to apologize now. Humanity had already moved on to other concerns, and they were not. Looking back. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council was facing complete collapse, and Chairman Veltar finally admitted they needed to swallow their pride. He stood before the emergency assembly and spoke words that would have been unthinkable. Just months earlier, the Council needed humanity back. They needed human technology, human expertise, and human protection. They needed to apologize and offer whatever terms were necessary to bring their former allies home. The emergency session lasted 18 hours as species after species admitted how badly they had underestimated humanity's contributions. The Zephyrian delegates spoke about cargo ships being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. The Altarian representative described worlds going dark as power grids failed without human maintenance. The Regelian ambassador reported that the plague doctor Zara Wells had been fighting had now spread to 6 systems and killed over 40 million people. Veltar authorized a formal, diplomatic mission to Earth with full authority to negotiate humanity's return to the Council. The delegation included representatives from every major species and carried official apologies written on ceremonial materials from each of their worlds. They also brought offers of compensation, guarantees of better treatment, and promises that humanity would be given the respect they deserved. Admiral Pete Collins was commanding the Sol System Defense Fleet when the alien delegation arrived at the border. He watched their ships approach and felt no anger or satisfaction, only a kind of sad weariness. Pete had spent 15 years fighting alongside these same species and had considered many of them friends. But friendship was supposed to work both ways, and these aliens had never treated humanity as equals. The delegation requested permission to enter human space and meet with Earth's leaders. Pete's response was polite but firm. Humanity was no longer part of galactic affairs and had no interest in resuming diplomatic relations. The alien ships were welcome to transmit any messages they wished, but they would not be allowed to proceed further into the Sol System. If they attempted to force their way past the border, they would be stopped. The Zephyrian commander decided to test Pete's resolve. He had 3 heavy cruisers under his command and believed that human defenses could not possibly be as strong as the rumors suggested. He ordered his ships to advance past the warning beacons and head directly for Earth. His tactical officers were confident that they could punch through any resistance and force humanity to negotiate. They made it exactly 47 kilometers past the border before every system on all 3 ships simply stopped working. Engines went dead, weapons powered down, life support switched to emergency backup, and navigation computers showed nothing but error messages. The ships were not damaged, and the crews were unharmed, but they were completely helpless. Pete's voice came over their communication system with a simple message. This was their only warning. Humanity sought no conflict but would defend themselves. If necessary, human rescue ships arrived within minutes to tow the disabled alien vessels back to the border. The Zephyrian crews were treated with professional courtesy and given food and medical attention while their ships were repaired. But they were also scanned thoroughly, and every detail of their technology was recorded. The humans wanted to make sure that future intrusions could be stopped even more efficiently. Meanwhile, the situation in Council space was getting worse every day. The Kepler station had been completely abandoned after the 3rd major pirate attack. Commander Jake Morrison's replacement had tried to maintain security, but without human patrol ships and intelligence networks, the pirates always seemed to be one step ahead. Trade through that sector had dropped to almost nothing, and several colonies were being evacuated. Dr. Amy Watson was working in her laboratory on Luna and watching the galactic news feeds with growing concern. She saw reports of millions dying from diseases that human medicine could have cured easily. She saw descriptions of worlds going hungry because crops were failing without human agricultural support. She felt guilty about the suffering, but she also remembered how the Council had voted to steal her life's work and give it away for free. Amy's current research was making incredible breakthroughs that would have seemed like magic to the aliens who had dismissed humanity. She had developed medical scanners that could diagnose any disease in seconds and treatments that could cure conditions previously thought hopeless. Her team had created agricultural techniques that could turn desert worlds into gardens and power systems that could provide unlimited, clean energy. But this technology stayed on human worlds and was shared only with human colonies. The Vorthan Empire was collapsing faster than anyone had expected. Without human protection, their trade routes were overrun by the Ravager swarms that humanity used to keep contained in the Outer Rim. These insectoid creatures reproduced rapidly and consumed everything in their path. Human xenobiologists had developed ways to control their population and direct their movements away from inhabited worlds. But that knowledge was gone now, and the Ravagers were spreading unchecked. Emperor Kraktar watched his empire crumble as world after world fell to the swarms. His military could not fight creatures that reproduced faster than they could be killed, and ate anything organic they encountered. 3 entire star systems had been stripped bare of all life, and the Ravagers were moving toward the Vorthan homeworld. Kraktar had been the loudest voice calling humans selfish and untrustworthy. Now he was begging them for help that would never come. The quantum communication network was falling apart too. Engineer Tony Mitchell had designed the system to be self-maintaining, but only if the central control algorithms were updated regularly. Without those updates, the network was gradually losing coherence and messages were taking longer to reach their destinations. Some remote systems had lost contact completely and were becoming isolated from the rest of the galaxy. Tony was working on Mars now and developing communication technology that made his previous work look primitive. Humans could now send messages instantly across unlimited distances, and their networks were completely secure from outside interference. But these advances remained hidden from the aliens who had taken Tony's previous gifts for granted. Secretary General Mary Phillips was coordinating the human exodus from her office on Mars and watching the reports from Council Space with mixed feelings. She felt sad about the suffering, but also proud of how humanity had handled their departure. They had not destroyed anything or hurt anyone. They had simply taken their knowledge and skills and gone home. The galaxy's problems were entirely self-inflicted. Consequences of treating their most valuable allies with contempt and disrespect. Mary received dozens of messages every day from alien leaders begging for human assistance. They offered money, technology, territorial concessions, and political reforms. Some even offered to make humans the dominant species in the Council if they would just come back and fix the problems that were destroying galactic civilization. But Mary's response was always the same. Humanity had moved beyond the need for galactic politics and was focused on their own development now. The irony was not lost on her. Humanity had left the Council to avoid conflict, but their absence was causing more destruction than any war they might have fought. The galaxy was learning that human cooperation had been the invisible foundation that held their civilization together. Without it, they were sliding rapidly back into the chaos and barbarism that had existed before the Council's formation. Dr. Zara Wells was still fighting the plague on Rigel 7, but she was losing badly. The death toll had reached 60 million and the disease was mutating faster than her team could develop treatments. She knew that human medical experts could have stopped the outbreak in its early stages, but they were gone now and showed no interest in helping. Zara sent personal messages to Dr. Amy Watson begging for assistance, but they were never answered. The galaxy was discovering that humanity's greatest strength had not been their technology or their military power. It had been their willingness to share their advantages freely and help others solve problems that seemed impossible. That generosity was gone now and could not be bought back with apologies or promises of better treatment. 2 years had passed since humanity walked away and the Galactic Council was dying a slow and painful death. Member species were withdrawing from the Alliance one by one as it became clear that the Council could no longer provide the basic services that had justified its existence. The great galactic civilization that had taken centuries to build was crumbling in less than a decade. Secretary General Mary Phillips sat in her office on Mars and watched the daily reports from Council Space with growing amazement. She had expected some problems after humanity's departure, but the scale of the collapse was beyond anything she had imagined. It seemed that humans had been quietly holding the entire galaxy together, and nobody had realized it until they were gone. The Vorthan Empire had lost 7 entire star systems to the Ravager swarms, and Emperor Kraktar was preparing to evacuate his homeworld. The insectoid creatures had consumed everything in their path, and their numbers were growing exponentially. Human xenobiologists had spent decades developing methods to control the Ravagers, but that knowledge was locked away in databases that the aliens could not access. Dr. Ben Carter had been the leading expert on Ravager behavior before humanity left the Council. He was now working at a research station in the Centauri system and developing new ways to protect human colonies from similar threats. His latest innovations could eliminate entire swarms without harming other life forms, but he felt no obligation to share this technology with aliens who had treated his people so badly. The quantum communication network was fragmenting rapidly. As relay stations failed across the galaxy, engineer Tony Mitchell had designed the system to be robust and self-repairing, but only with proper maintenance and regular updates. Without human oversight, the network was developing critical errors that spread like a virus through the entire system. Planets that had enjoyed instant communication for generations were suddenly cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Trade negotiations that should have taken minutes now required weeks, as messages traveled by conventional means. Military coordination became almost impossible, and several species found themselves fighting each other because of communication failures and misunderstandings. Tony was aware of these problems, but he was focused on more important work now. Human colonies were being connected by a new type of quantum network that operated on principles the aliens had never discovered. This system was faster, more secure, and completely immune to the problems that were destroying the old network. But it was designed exclusively for human use and would never be shared with outsiders. The medical crisis was also getting worse. Dr. Zara Wells had finally stopped the plague on Rigel 7, but only after it had killed over 100 million people. The cure she developed was crude and dangerous compared to what human medical science could have provided. She estimated that 90% of those deaths could have been prevented if she had access to the galactic medical database that humans had maintained. Other medical emergencies were occurring throughout Council space as alien doctors struggled with diseases and conditions that human experts had routinely handled. Cancer rates were climbing because the advanced treatments that humans had shared were no longer available. Genetic disorders that had been eliminated decades ago were returning as the complex gene therapies required human expertise to maintain. Dr. Amy Watson was making incredible medical breakthroughs in her laboratory on Luna, but this knowledge stayed within human space. She had developed treatments that could extend human lifespan to over 200 years and techniques that could repair genetic damage at the cellular level. Her work was advancing so rapidly that human medicine was becoming almost miraculous. Compared to what the aliens could achieve on their own, the economic situation was catastrophic. Trade between worlds had dropped by 80% as shipping became too dangerous and expensive without human protection. Manufacturing was grinding to a halt as supply chains collapsed and raw materials became impossible to obtain. Unemployment was rising on every world, and many governments were facing revolution as their people demanded solutions that simply did not exist. Manager Veltok had been forced to shut down his mining operation on Vega Prime when his last fusion reactor finally failed completely. His alien engineers had managed to keep it running for 18 months after the humans left, but they could not perform the complex maintenance procedures that the system required. Without those rare minerals, manufacturing throughout the sector had come to a complete stop. The defense situation was equally desperate. Space pirates were operating with complete freedom now that human patrol fleets were gone. They had grown bold enough to attack major worlds and even raid government facilities. Some pirate groups had formed alliances and were beginning to resemble organized military forces that threatened entire star systems. Captain Rex Holen was trying to defend the Centauri system with a detection network that was barely functional. His sensors missed more threats than they detected, and his alien crews could not maintain the equipment properly. 3 major attacks had already gotten through his defenses and destroyed civilian targets. Rex knew it was only a matter of time. Before something even worse happened, Admiral Kexran had been forced to withdraw his fleet from border patrol duties because his ships could no longer be repaired or resupplied effectively. The complex maintenance procedures for advanced warships required expertise that only humans possessed. His vessels were breaking down faster than they could be fixed, and his weapons were becoming obsolete as alien military. Technology stagnated without human innovation. Agricultural production had collapsed on dozens of worlds as the hybrid crops that human scientists had developed began to fail. These plants required precise genetic modifications and chemical treatments that alien agriculturalists could not provide. Worlds that had fed billions for decades were now struggling to grow enough food for their own populations. Governor Lextar of New Series was watching his people slowly starve as crop yields dropped every season. His agricultural specialists had tried everything they could think of, but they simply did not understand the complex biological processes that made human farming techniques so effective. Other worlds in his sector were begging him for food shipments that he could no longer provide. The Galactic Council was meeting almost continuously now, but their sessions had become exercises in futility. They could identify dozens of critical problems, but they could not solve any of them without human expertise. Chairman Veltar had tried hiring human consultants through intermediaries, but all such requests were politely declined. Humanity was not interested in helping the Council, even for enormous payments. Some species were beginning to blame each other for the crisis. The Zephyrians accused the Vorthans of driving humanity away with their arrogance. The Altarians claimed that the Rigelians had been too greedy in voting to steal human medical technology. Old grudges and territorial disputes were resurging as the social bonds that the Council had created began to dissolve. Military conflicts were breaking out between former allies as resources became scarce and communication became difficult. The Kepler Station incident had triggered a series of retaliatory raids that were escalating into open warfare. Without human mediation and peacekeeping forces, these conflicts were spreading rapidly and threatening to engulf entire sectors. The galaxy was learning that humanity had been much more than just another member species. They had been the glue that held galactic civilization together through their technology, their expertise, and their willingness to help others solve difficult problems. Without that stabilizing influence, the galaxy was reverting to the chaos and barbarism that had existed before the Council's formation. Mary Phillips received reports every day about alien governments collapsing, trade networks failing, and entire star systems descending into anarchy. She felt sorry for the innocent civilians who were suffering, but she also felt proud of how humanity had handled the situation. They had not destroyed anything or hurt anyone. They had simply taken their knowledge and skills and gone home. The galaxy's problems were entirely the result of alien choices and alien attitudes. Humanity was thriving in isolation. Their science was advancing rapidly without the burden of supporting ungrateful allies. Their colonies were growing strong and self-sufficient. They had learned an important lesson about the difference between being needed and being valued. The galaxy could keep its politics and its conflicts. Humanity had found better things to do with their time and talents. 5 years had passed since humanity walked away without speaking, and the galaxy had returned to the darkness that existed before the Council's formation. Ancient wars had resumed between species that had been allies for generations. Trade networks had collapsed completely. Planets that had once been connected by instant communication were now isolated and forgotten. The great galactic civilization was nothing but a memory now. A small battered shuttle approached the edge of human space, carrying the last survivors of what had once been the mighty Galactic Council. Chairman Veltar sat in the passenger compartment, holding a collection of formal apologies written on ceremonial materials from every member species. His blue skin had lost its healthy glow, and his once proud bearing was bent with age and defeat. Beside him sat representatives from 12 other species, all that remained of an alliance that had once included over 200 worlds. The shuttle's pilot was nervous as they approached the human border. Stories had spread throughout the galaxy. about alien ships that tried to enter human space without permission. They were never destroyed, but they were disabled so completely that their crews had to be rescued by human vessels. The humans always treated these intruders with polite courtesy, but the message was clear. Humanity would defend itself and its territory, was not open to uninvited guests. Admiral P. Collins received the request for safe passage and felt a mixture of sadness and irony. These were the same aliens who had laughed at humanity and treated them like junior partners in their own alliance. Now they came as beggars hoping for mercy from the people they had dismissed and insulted. Pete granted permission for the shuttle to proceed to Luna Station, but warned that any attempt to deviate from the approved flight path would result in immediate escort back to the border. Ambassador Lisa Torres was waiting for them in the reception hall of Luna Station. She had been chosen to receive the delegation because of her experience with alien cultures and her reputation for diplomatic courtesy. Lisa understood that this meeting was important not because of what the aliens wanted, but because of what it represented. This was humanity's chance to show the galaxy what dignity and grace looked like even when dealing with former enemies. The delegation was escorted to a conference room with large windows that looked out at the construction sites of humanity's new deep space exploration fleet. Ships designed not for war or trade, but for the peaceful discovery of new worlds far beyond the chaos that the galaxy had become. The aliens could see the vessels taking shape in the orbital shipyards and realized that humanity had moved far beyond the technology they remembered from 5 years ago. Chairman Veltar stood slowly and began to speak. His voice was weak and filled with the weight of years spent watching his civilization crumble. He spoke about the mistakes the Council had made and the prejudices they had harbored against humanity. He admitted that they had taken human contributions for granted and failed to appreciate the generosity and wisdom that humans had shown for decades. The formal apology was everything that humanity had deserved to hear years earlier. Veltar acknowledged that humans had provided more ships, soldiers, technology, and expertise than any other species. He recognized that human medical advances had saved billions of alien lives and that human protection had kept the peace throughout the galaxy. He confessed that the Council had been motivated by jealousy and fear of human capabilities rather than any genuine concern about fairness or equality. Veltar offered complete restoration of human membership in the Council with guarantees of leadership positions and veto power over all major decisions. He promised tribute payments to compensate for past injustices and exclusive access to any technologies that remaining Council species might develop. He even offered to make humanity the dominant species in a reformed alliance that would be structured entirely around human preferences and priorities. Lisa listened to every word with polite attention but felt no satisfaction or vindication. The apology was sincere and complete, but it was also meaningless. The galaxy that had rejected humanity no longer existed. The species that had dismissed human contributions were scattered and broken. The Council that had voted to steal human technology was dead, and its surviving members had nothing left to offer. When Veltar finished speaking, Lisa stood and walked to the window. She pointed at the construction sites where human engineers were building ships that would carry their people to new worlds in distant galaxies. She explained that humanity had spent 5 years developing technologies that made their previous achievements look primitive. They had created faster-than-light drives that could cross intergalactic distances, terraforming systems that could create habitable worlds in decades, and life extension treatments that would allow humans to explore the universe for centuries more. Importantly, humanity had learned valuable lessons about the difference between being needed and being valued. They had discovered that their greatest strength was not their technology or their military power, but their ability to walk away from situations that did not serve their interests. The galaxy had taught them that sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect was dignified silence followed by complete withdrawal. Lisa explained that humanity appreciated the Council's apology and wished them well in their future endeavors. But humans had moved beyond the need for galactic politics and alien approval. They were focused on exploring new frontiers and building better civilizations among the stars. The old galaxy with its petty conflicts and primitive attitudes held no attraction for people who had glimpsed the infinite possibilities that lay beyond. The delegation was provided with comfortable quarters and excellent meals during their brief stay at Luna Station. They were given tours of human facilities that showcased technologies so advanced they seemed like magic. Medical centers where doctors could cure any disease in minutes. Agricultural stations where scientists grew food in environments that should have been completely hostile to life. Research laboratories where physicists manipulated the fundamental forces of the universe like children playing with toys. Dr. Amy Watson showed them through her medical research facility and demonstrated treatments that could repair genetic damage at the cellular level. She explained that humans had eliminated aging, disease, and death from natural causes. Her work was advancing so rapidly that she expected to achieve true biological immortality within the next decade. But this knowledge would remain exclusive to humanity and their chosen allies. Engineer Tony Mitchell gave them a presentation on the new quantum communication networks that connected human colonies across multiple galaxies. He showed them star maps displaying dozens of worlds that humans had discovered and settled during their 5 years of isolation. Each of these colonies was protected by defense systems that made the old Council's military forces look like ancient relics. The aliens realized that they were not just looking at advanced technology, but at an entirely different kind of civilization. Humanity had transcended the limitations that kept other species trapped in cycles of conflict and scarcity. They had become something greater than what they were when they left the Council, and they had no intention of returning to their former limitations. On the final day of their visit, the delegation was taken to the observation deck of Luna Station for a farewell ceremony. Lisa Torres delivered humanity's final response to the galaxy that had rejected them. She thanked the aliens for their apology and acknowledged the sincerity of their regrets. But she also made it clear that humanity had closed the door on their galactic past and opened new doors to infinite possibilities among the stars. The shuttle departed, human space carrying a message that would spread throughout what remained of the galaxy. Humanity had forgiven their former allies but would not be returning to help them. The humans had found better things to do with their time and talents. They were explorers now, seeking new worlds and new civilizations that might prove more worthy of human friendship and cooperation. Chairman Veltar sat in his shuttle as it crossed back into the chaos of Council space and understood that his mission had failed completely. Not because the humans were angry or vindictive, but because they had simply moved beyond the need for what the galaxy could offer. The Council's apology had come too late, not by months or years, but by entire ages of development and growth. The galaxy could keep its wars and its politics. Humanity had found the stars.